booth for the last perspectives, and it's going to be a fun one. It's about music. We have with us Aakash Trivedi, a tabla player and educator, training under the tabla maestro Pandit Yogesh Samsi. He's going to talk about tabla through the ages, explore its origin, making, and evolution. He will be accompanied on the harmonium by Akul Panchal, a student of Pandit Sudhir Nayak, and Mitali Dhruva, trained in the Kathak dance form under Padma Vibhushan Kumudini Lakhia at the Kadamb Centre for dance.
Very good afternoon to all of you who've come here for the lecture today. And I don't know how many of you have a background in music, but if you do, it's great. If you don't, also, it's great. No problems. And am I audible till the end? So, I'll be talking about this instrument that you see here, the tabla. A lot of you might have seen it or heard concerts. It's basically a two-piece drum, and the left-hand drum is called the baya, and this is called the daya, which in Hindi means left and right. So, before I go into how the tabla evolved, how it's made, and all those details, I would just like to play a short piece in front of you, and then we'll move on with the lecture. Thank you. So, what I just played was in tabla terminology. This is called a peshkar. So this is like an introduction that a tabla player gives when he begins his solo piece or solo performance. And what you could hear on the harmonium here is known as the lehra or the nagma. So this is like a melodic structure that keeps the time cycle. So what I was playing was 16 beats in a very slow tempo. So 1, 2, 3, 4 and till 16. This is how it was repeating cyclically, and I was improvising with a given theme in mind. And slowly, I mean, you would have noticed that it keeps going faster, but that speed increase is relative. It's not, so the base tempo stays the same, and it's with respect to that I'm doing my improvisations. So this is just in a nutshell a little bit about how a tabla player begins his or her solo recital. Now, this instrument, as we know it, this tradition is about, let's say, 250 to 300 years old, because there's a lot of debate regarding the history and the origin of tabla. Some scholars claim that this is an instrument that has come from Persia. Some scholars claim this is already an Indian instrument because there is evidence to support those claims. So there are temples where there are carvings of figures playing an instrument that looks very much like a tabla. But I mean, we leave that aside a little bit. But the instrument as we know it today, this tradition is about 300 years old. And the epicenter of the evolution of tabla was Delhi. So that's where the uh, the Mughal Empire had its capital, and that's where most of the royal patronage was. And tabla, or in general, Hindustani classical music and vocal was under the patronage of the kings at that time. So this was more, I mean, it had taken the form of court music. And in those times, there were specific families which were professional musicians. I mean, that was their only source of livelihood. And this knowledge wasn't shared so openly as it is today. I mean, now anybody can go up and just, learn tabla or learn vocal, classical vocal, or pick up an instrument like a sitar or sarod, but it wasn't like that in those times. There were specific families who used to have this expertise. Now, uh, vocal music was given the number one status in those times, and tabla was more of a supporting instrument. Right now, what I played was a solo piece, but in back in the day, it was quite the opposite. So you would have a vocalist sitting in the center, and a tabla player not sitting here but behind. So that was there was this kind of societal imbalance in which the tabla player or the sarangi player or the harmonium player would be behind. And uh, I mean, from concert fees to just the respect that was given to musicians, vocalists were always placed at a higher pedestal compared to tabla players. So, among the tabla players of those times, this somewhere started building an idea inside them that what is it that gives vocalists this status that they have in the music scene. So the basic idea which gives them this importance is their ability to improvise. So in Hindustani classical vocal, uh, what they sing is known as khayal. Now khayal in Hindi means a thought or imagination. So what they are able to do is they are able to pick a theme and then improvise based on that, which is something that tabla players at that time couldn't do. So what they would do is just play the theka of the tal that they were supposed to play to accompany. So for example, if you take teen tal. So when the concert is going on, the tabla player is mostly just playing the theka like this, or if it's a slower composition, it's a slower paced tal, whatever. But this was mainly the role of a tabla player. So they then borrowed ideas from vocal music. So they decided to work on compositions and build a language that could be expanded upon. So that is how compositions like the Peshkar or a Qaida or a Rela came into being, because these are all compositions that can be improvised upon. It is not something that you memorize and come on stage. So it's like extempore. You're given a topic and somebody tells you you have to speak on this. So you know what you have to speak on. You know the scope and the limit of your discussion, and then you build along those lines. It's not something that you memorize and come. So tabla playing has evolved over the years into something like this, where you can actually come in, pick a theme, and then expand on that on the spot. So what I was playing right now, the Peshkar, that goes like dha kir dha dhinna dha tit dha dha dhinna dha dha tinna ta krita tinna ta tit dha dha dhinna dha kir dha dhinna dha. This is one cycle. Now, based on this, I was improvising. So if you notice, I'm only allowed to improvise in certain constraints. So I have to use the language of the instrument to build my improvisation. So dha kridha dhinna dha tit dha dha dhinna dha kridha dhinna tit dha dha dhinna dha tit dha dha dhinna dha kridha tinna ta krita tinna ta tit ta ta tinna ta krita tinna ghina dha dha dhinna dha tit dha dha dhinna dha kridha dhinna dha. So this is how it keeps moving along with the time cycle. And there is a lot of scope for improvisation in the Peshkar and also in the Qaida. Then as we go along the solo format of a tabla recital, there are also compositions which are fixed. So there is the tradition that I spoke to you about, 250 years old or 300 years old. So there have been many great tabla players in India over these many years who created very attractive compositions, which usually you will hear in a tabla soul. Now, the origin of tabla as a solo playing instrument, like I said, began in Delhi. Over time, it moved to different parts in the country, which gave rise to what we know as the gharanas. So some of you might have heard this term. It's something that is very widely used in all forms of Indian classical music, be it vocal music, instrumental, tabla playing, or Kathak. So gharana literally means ghar or house, okay? Because like I told you, at that time, this music was restricted to families. So that ghar would represent a certain style of tabla playing. So the gharana that was the first gharana of tabla was the Delhi gharana, which was established by Ustad Siddhar Khan Dhadi. So he began the exploration of tabla as a solo instrument. Now each gharana over time has now the connotation has changed. So it's no longer just one family doing that music. I mean, I am not from a family from Punjab, but I play the Punjab gharana because I've learnt under that tradition. So now gharana, the meaning of gharana has shifted from being restricted to one family to being a certain musical style. So in Delhi gharana, when tabla evolved, the technique was focused on using just the two fingers of the right hand and similarly of the left hand. So strokes like na, ti, tita or tirakita were used a lot, and you didn't have a lot of playing like this, which is lifting the hand. So if you notice, the ring finger is always on the tabla. So this was something that was explored by the Delhi gharana. Then one of the disciples of the Ustads of Delhi moved to Lucknow. Now Lucknow at that time was a huge epicenter of Kathak, which is the North Indian classical dance form. So with Kathak, there was this instrument known as the pakhavaj, which is a longish cylindrical instrument which is played sideways, not like this. like the tabla, and it has a very deep, resonant, and a very powerful sound. So when tabla went to Lucknow, it had to kind of compete with the pakhavaj, because the pakhavaj was a very majestic um, and powerful sounding instrument. So the tabla with this kind of technique wasn't able to match the volume and the stroke play that the pakhavaj had. So what the Lucknow Gharana Ustads did was to incorporate pakhavaj techniques into tabla. So I'll just give you a small example. I'll play something that comes from the Delhi style, and then I'll show you how the pakhavaj technique changes the way it sounds. So Delhi style would be. So if you notice, it's a very neat sounding composition, and the technique is very specific. Now you change this to a full hand kind of approach, where you're lifting the hand for more volume, but the tone changes. So it's the same syllable but a different tone. So instead of, it becomes. So this change from the finger technique to a more full hand technique gave tabla a lot of volume and power to kind of match and go along with the pakhavaj. So this technique started being used by tabla players, and this gave rise to a new style, which was, because of the geographical location, called the Lucknow Gharana. Then there were two offshoots of the Lucknow Gharana. One was the Farrukhabad Gharana. Farrukhabad is a town in Uttar Pradesh, and the second was the Banaras Gharana. So these migrations happened at different times. Farrukhabad did not have as much of a Kathak influenced landscape in the music scene, so it retained certain characteristics of the Delhi style as well as the full hand techniques that were used in the Lucknow style. Banaras, on the other hand, had a very different musical landscape. I don't know, maybe someone here could be from Banaras, but if you look back a little into history, Banaras has a very, very rich musical tradition of Thumri, of Kathak also, and also of devotional music, bhajans. So the tabla playing over there was influenced very heavily by these musical forms, and that is how certain changes came about in the technique, and that gave rise to the Banaras Gharana. Then at a later stage, there was another wave of migration from Delhi to a town called Ajrada, again in UP, and because Ajrada did not have this influence of Kathak or the Pakhavaj, it maintained the more or less it maintained the Delhi technique of tabla playing. But what it also did was involve the ring finger a lot. So instead of just going like, there were a lot of complicated syllables which were used. I'll just give you an example. So syllables like or. So using the ring finger gives you a lot of technical superiority, because now you're dividing the load between the three fingers. It's not just two. So you're able to play faster, and that's how that gharana came to be known for very elegant and faster paced compositions. So that's a little bit about the Ajrada gharana. So these are 5 gharanas which developed in the northeastern part of the country. Now there was another parallel tradition in Punjab. So Punjab did not have the tabla as an instrument for a very long time. It was mostly a Pakhavaj tradition. Slowly, the same ustads who used to play the Pakhavaj incorporated tabla also in their style. So that style again was very heavily dominated by the strokes I showed you, technique like this, as opposed to the finger technique. And it had a lot of compositions which came down directly from Pakhavaj. So it developed a very open, resonant, and powerful style. If you have heard of the name Zakir Hussain, he was a tabla player who was from the Punjab gharana, and his father, Ustad Allah Rakha, he was one of the pioneers of that gharana. So this is how uh, tabla, as we know it today, has come to us. All these styles have undergone uh, a lot of evolution, a lot of thought over the past 150, 200 years, and today, because of that, we have very distinct uh, stylistic traits of each gharana. So if you listen to a tabla player from Delhi, he doesn't need to say that, okay, I'm a Delhi gharana tabla player. You can look at the technique, you can listen to the sound, and you just know that it's Delhi gharana. Obviously, you need a little bit of background, but it's very easy to tell, because these stylistic traits have uh, matured over the past 150 or 200 years. Yeah. Now, you might be wondering about how this instrument is made. It's not a machine made instrument, it's a handmade instrument. And this, what we call the tabla on the right hand side, is made of wood. Uh, Shisham wood is usually used, or in other areas of the country, even mango wood is used. Any guesses on what the skin might be? This is animal skin. So this is made of goat skin. And the left hand drum, or the baya, is made of metal, uh, usually steel or brass or copper, and both are hollow from inside. But the construction is slightly different. So this is completely hollow, and the skin is just put on this, while this is semi hollow. So the wood is kind of carved out from it up to a certain height, and then it's left alone. Now, what you see here, these pegs are used to tune the tabla. The same goes for the baya too. Uh, these wooden pegs, when I hit it with the hammer, is what controls the tension that you have on the skin. So it's very important for the skin to be pulled equally in all directions. So if you look at this is almost, these are aligned similarly. It's not, one is not here and the second one is down. So basically the point is to kind of equalize the tension on all sides of the drum head. The baya, on the other hand, doesn't need as much tuning as the tabla does, because this has to be tuned to whatever instrument we are playing with. So if he is playing from C sharp, then the tabla also has to be tuned to the same note, because if it isn't, it sounds very, very discordant. I can give you an example. C sharp. Now this is not tuned to C sharp. So anybody with a little bit of ear training can figure out that this is very discordant. Whereas this is absolutely in line with the harmonium. It could be any other instrument, a sitar or a sarod or vocal music, anything. Now, on the skin, you have this black portion, which is known as the shahi. So shahi means ink in Hindi, right? So this is a paste which is made from rice flour, obviously dye, and certain other chemicals and powders which are kind of specific to every tabla maker. They don't share this with us or with anybody else because it's their trade secret. So this is a sticky paste first, and they apply it on the skin, and then let it dry till it reaches this point where it's polished and completely dry. Now, what this does is this kind of controls the resonance that comes out of the drum head. So if this wasn't there, I wouldn't be able to tune this with the harmonium or with any other instrument. So it is the shahi which gives this ability to tune the tabla. Now, what happens next is, because of the shahi, you have a huge range of sounds that can be produced on the tabla and also on the baya. So when you hit the very edge of the tabla, this stroke is called na. Now you can notice another circle which is just next to the edge of the tabla. This is called the maidan. So when I strike there, it is tin. So the two strokes, na and tin. So these are both resonant strokes. If you notice that the sound carries for a little bit, it doesn't close. Now on the shahi you can produce closed notes. So this is called T or T with the full hand. This is called T. So you're basically shutting down the resonance of the tabla completely. On the shahi you can also play an open note which is also known as tin, which sounds like this. On the baya you have just two strokes, one is ge, one is k. So this is an open stroke, this is a closed stroke. What happens now with a combination of these strokes is that you are able to give rise to a full-fledged language, and it's an abstract language. It doesn't make sense like English or Hindi would, but if you spend enough time with the instrument, you kind of begin to see some sense in it. So na and ge played together becomes dha. Now tin and ge together becomes din. So this combination of the left and right gives rise to a whole range of composite strokes. Now when you start combining the composite and the single sound syllables, you get phrases. Once you get phrases, you can move on to sentences. So I'd just like to give a small demo on how you can move from the single sound syllables to actually constructing sentences with the instrument. So like I said, you can go on and on improvising like this. So this is how from single sound syllables to compound sound syllables to a full-fledged language which has phrases that comes about. Now I would like to shift to a very, very important facet of tabla, which is accompaniment. So like I was telling you earlier, tabla is something that primarily was an accompanying instrument for vocal music and instrumental music, and also Kathak dance. So the role of the tabla is, the first role is to keep the time cycle. So the compositions in vocal music or instrumental music are set to certain time cycles. It could be 5 beats, 8 beats, 16 beats, different tals, but they're all set to a certain time cycle. So it is the job of the tabla player to keep that time cycle. How many of you have heard a metronome? Have you heard how it sounds? Yeah, it has a click kind of a sound. So you could also use a metronome to keep time, right? It's the same thing. Whether the tabla does the job or the metronome does it, it's the same thing. So I just want to demonstrate what happens when uh, you use a tabla against a metronome. So I'm happy to have Akul here with me, and he's going to sing a composition, and we'll have the metronome playing with that, and then we get the tabla in, and we see how that changes things. So I hope you can hear the clip.
I am not a trained classical singer, but I would like to sing a bandish. And we have a tradition of taking the name of the composer. The particular bandish is composed by Ustad Fayyaz Khan Sahab of Agra Gharana. The rag is Shuddh Sarang. अब मोरी बात, अब मोरी बात, अब मोरी बात, मान ले पिहरवा मोरा रे, मान ले पिहरवा मोरा रे, जाऊँ मैं तो पे वारी 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 वारी, अब मोरी बात, अब मोरी बात, अब मोरी बात, मान ले पिहरवा मोरा रे, मान ले पिहरवा मोरा रे, जाऊँ मैं तो पे वारी 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 वारी, अब मोरी बात, अब मोरी बात, अब मोरी बात, अब मोरी बात.
So any difference? I mean, we had the metronome playing, it was probably more precise than me, but what it does to the overall aesthetics of presentation is it's a huge change. I mean, you have a click which does not have a graph. It doesn't go up and down in volume. There is no, I mean, it's so accurate that it becomes boring after a point. So when I play the tabla, I am doing the job of the metronome, but I am also adding the melodic possibilities that a tabla can offer. So if you see the left hand drum over here, there's a lot that you can do with this. It doesn't just go like, you can actually bend the sound, and because of that it complements the composition very well. And there are also fun things like you can delay the tempo a little bit, or you can speed it up, but you always compensate. So if you delay it, you have to speed it up in the next beat, or if you speed it up, you can compress it or whatever, things like that, which is not possible in a metronome, because the singing isn't metronomic. It's a language. He is actually singing in a language, and for him to bring out the emotional content in the composition, he has to have that human element or that human touch in his presentation, which can be kind of mirrored on the tabla. So it's not possible with something like a metronome. So yes, you use a metronome for your practice to develop that hold on the tempo, but having an instrument like the tabla offers a lot more, offers a lot of possibilities to the presentation of Hindustani music. So we'll just continue a little bit with the demo for vocal music, and how the tabla can kind of go along with what the vocalist is doing. It doesn't need to just keep playing dha din din da dha din din da dha din din da din din da. So So there are movements that he does which can be, if I could say, transliterated on the tabla. Obviously you can't do exactly that because I don't know what he is doing. So I'm kind of just following. Even he doesn't know what he's going to do next. So he starts the composition and then he's improvising, and I'm kind of going along with that. So I need a certain level of familiarity with that music, but I don't need to memorize what I'm going to do or what he is going to do. So again, the same bandish.
अब मोरी बात, अब मोरी बात, अब मोरी बात, मान ले पी हरवा मुरारे, मान ले पी हरवा मुरारे, जाऊँ मैं तो पे वारी 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 वारी, अब मोरी बात, अब मोरी बात.
So what you saw was an impromptu improvisation with the bandish, which is what he was singing. And like I said, the role of the tabla player is not just to keep the time cycle, but also to embellish the presentation aesthetically. So if you see, I'm using my baya in different ways. I'm using different syllables on the tabla to kind of match what he's singing or match the words. And it's also important that I keep in mind the subject that he's singing on. So what the bandish that he was singing was Ab Mori Baat Manale Piya. So it's talking about how somebody is requesting her lover to accede to her request or to listen to what she is saying. And it's not something that demands a very aggressive kind of accompaniment. It's a very delicate topic, I mean. So you also accompany in that way. You keep the temperament of the composition and the rag in mind, and you accompany like that. Otherwise, I mean, you will end up spoiling what the artist is trying to do, and that is not what good accompaniment should look like. Now, the second, stream of or branch of Indian music that tabla goes along very well is with instrumental music. So you have the harmonium here, you might have heard a sitar or a sarod. These are the instruments that a tabla accompanies frequently. Now, the approach to accompanying instrumental music is slightly different compared to vocal music. Instrumental music offers a little more scope for the tabla player to go along with what is happening on the instrument. And the composition structures are also a little different. So what he will play now is known as a gat. So it's not in the time cycle that you heard until now, which was teen tal, 16 beats. This is going to be in a 7-beat time cycle. So just a little bit about how tabla goes with instrumental music. So this was a short demo with instrumental music, and instrumental music doesn't, the big difference is there are no lyrics. right? It's just a tune that is repeating. Or even if he is playing something that has words, obviously you can't hear them unless you know the composition and you can figure out that these are the words. So you just have to go by the melody that's being created on the instrument and accompany that as well as possible, keeping the mood of the composition and the rag in mind. And what I played in the end was a short piece which was in the same time cycle. The important thing for the tabla player is to make sure that he doesn't mess up what the artist is trying to do. So in a 7-beat cycle, I have to be very careful that I'm not overplaying or underplaying. So I have to make sure that whatever piece I play is complementing the recital rather than kind of impeding into what he's doing. The last stream of music and dance which the tabla accompanies is Kathak, and I'd like to invite Mitali on stage. Now what you heard up until now was mostly, I mean, you could close your eyes and still enjoy the performance. But Kathak incorporates the visual aspect a lot, and along with that there is also the rhythmic aspect which a dancer translates through her feet. So we are going to try to demonstrate a little bit about how the tabla goes along with Kathak. So there are different compositions. Kathak has its own language and its own repertoire, and tabla has its own repertoire. But like I said, in Lucknow, these two kind of came together, and they have an independent evolution, but they also evolved together. So there are a lot of common elements in the two, and there is a lot of exchange that has happened over the years. So Kathak compositions are played by tabla players, tabla compositions are taken by Kathak dancers, and then they incorporate movements into that. So a lot of that has happened. So I'd like to hand over the mic to Mitali, and we'll try to present a few things in front of you.
Thank you, Aakash. Namaste, everybody. Today we are going to demonstrate two compositions. These compositions are called Tihai. So, as the word suggests, Tihai, it'll be repeated 3 times. And our gurus and our teachers have explained this concept to us in a manner that the first time that you do, the audience is sort of understanding what is happening. The second time, they figure it out, okay, this section is being repeated. And the third time, they're being able to enjoy. So that element of it being predictable makes it in fact more enjoyable, this particular composition of Tihai. Today we are presenting two Ginati ka Tihai. So like there are tabla bowls, there are Kathak bowls also. But our stalwart of Lucknow Gharana, his name is Pandit Birju Maharaj. He brought in this concept of Ginati ka Tihai. So they're based on counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like that. So there is no, it then becomes universal. There is no Kathak, there is no tabla. There are just numbers which me and you, all of us, can understand. So we'll try and present two Tihais. dina 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 di dina dha edo tincha dha edo tincha pa dha edo tincha pache dha di dina 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 di dina dha edo tincha pa dha edo tincha pache dha di dina 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 di dina dha. Okay, so we've heard from our gurus that in olden times it was said कि इनका नाच आज सुना. So they used to say इनका नाच सुना, and most of the upper body torso movements used to happen only so much. Much later, the vocabulary expanded and a lot of torso movements were incorporated, a lot of volumetric approach rather than just 2D and 1D approach was opened up. So right now what you saw was literal translation of tabla bowl with the footwork. There is no upper body, there is no abhinay involved. That paksh of dance is called nritya according to our shastras, Natya Shastra. The second paksh that we are going to present is called the Nritya Paksh. It has abhinay. And since we're talking about accompaniment of tabla with dance, the tabla player is going to follow the temperament of what the dancer is dancing and trying to portray. So I'll be presenting something called Gat Nikas. And it is abstract, it has no story, it has no words, but it has characters. So first I'll depict Krishna and then Radha. So the tabla player tries to accentuate the characteristics and the temperament of Krishna and versus then Radha. So masculine and very naughty and very playful and all of that with Krishna, and then later when the dancer shows Radha, it's very subtle, more madhur, more feminine, and more controlled in that sense. So we'll present a Gat Nikas.
Thank you so much, Mitali, for the lovely demo. So this is how, not this is how, but this is just an attempt by a tabla player and also the harmonium player, because if you noticed, his tunes and his melodies were also changing along with what she was doing. So this is, I mean, what I'm trying to convey here with the whole accompaniment demo section is that this music is something that is, it's reactive music. You are listening or watching somebody and reacting to it. It's not something that you memorize and come. So you can prepare as much as you want, but on stage, it's always going to be something new because you are making this music with other artists. And this is not, I mean, if it's a proper Kathak solo, it could go on for an hour or an hour and a half. And there is no way that you can memorize something like that. So you can know the basic compositions, but then you have to go along. And if you notice, I was constantly looking to my right. So I can't be looking here and doing all this. I have to watch her movements. I have to watch how her body is going, how her feet are moving, and what kind of music she is trying to create through the ghungroos and her feet. So all that comes into play, and all that awareness has to be there for somebody, I mean a tabla player or a harmonium player, who are playing the role of accompaniment to any kind of music, and in this case, Kathak. So we'd like to conclude with another short performance. Now this part that I'm playing is typically played at the end of a tabla solo recital, and I'll be playing a few compositions, a fixed composition which was created by the ustads of this tradition, and then I'll move on to a composition which is called a Rela, which is a fast-paced composition, and then conclude. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to Akul and to Mitali for being here with me and helping me to uh, kind of show you the possibilities that this instrument has to offer. I think we move to Q&A. If any of you have any questions, please feel free to.
Could you please raise your hand if you have questions?
Yeah, or we can make it the opposite and we'll ask you questions. No, you can, I mean, feel free to ask because there's a lot that I haven't been able to cover also in this presentation. So if there's anything that you're curious about, uh, please feel free to ask. Doesn't need to be a very technical question.
Thank you for that amazing performance. Like, I think everyone is truly mesmerized by it, like as ma'am told. During the performance, like you look at each other and there's some interaction that happens, like reassurance, right? So how important is that for you? Like if there is that element taken out, then what are the possible effects?
Yeah, that's a very good question. In fact, we're just kind of making up for our lack of rehearsals by looking at each other. But no, I mean, it's very important because like I told you, this is not something that is rehearsed. So there are certain markers in our instruments and in the music which keep telling us that we're doing fine. So whenever we approach one of those markers, you'll see an interaction between the two of us. So one of these is called the sum, which is the first beat of the tal that is being played. So whenever we come on the sum, it's like, okay, everything is fine. And good question, because when you remove this element, then a lot of possibilities get taken out, because you cannot then improvise freely, because you don't know whether the opposite person is comfortable with that or not, right? Because these are two different musical instruments, two different languages, but coming together on stage unrehearsed. So you need to have that connect with, on a human level also, with the artist that you're playing with. Like, for example, even with Mitali, I have to look at her. She needs to see what I'm playing, and or at least hear which beat is going on at that point of time. So yes, that reassurance is very, very important. And I've seen a lot of performances where there are two very, very good musicians on stage, but for whatever reason, they don't connect on a human level or on a musical level too. And then you see the concert quality goes down by several notches. But there are artists who've played together for maybe 10, 20 years. And when you look at those performances, it's absolutely mind-blowing because they have that connect. So it's not that they have whatever 20 years of rehearsals between them, but it's just that they know each other's tendencies, characteristics, whatever. So there's a lot of on the spot, what should I say, mischief involved in music making. So the tabla player might just decide to do something funky and the harmonium player has to go along with that. Or the harmonium player might decide to do that and I have to make sure that I don't mess it up. So these are things that you can't tell each other, but if I know him well enough, I know that he might come up with something like this. So I'm kind of prepared. So this might happen. So a very good example would be if you look at concerts of Pandit Shiv Kumar Sharma and Ustad Zakir Hussain, Santoor and Tabla. They have, I mean, an amazing connect. So they have a lot of respect and mutual admiration for each other, and also a lot of being together, making music together, whatever, going out for food together, and they have that bond. So that translates on the stage too. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Okay, now that one person has asked, other people are coming up.
Hello. I wanted to ask, have you ever tried mixing, say, classical music with more modern instruments? And does that work? Is that possible?
Definitely, yes. It does work. I mean, because we had a time constraint, I couldn't go in that direction. But yes, tabla works very well with modern music also. And the reason for this is that the language of rhythm is kind of universal. So I might be saying ta, dha, tin, whatever is my language. A djembe player might be using his language. A drummer might be using his language. But the numbers are the same. Like we did a number tihai, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or whatever. So those elements are the same. So it's very easy to kind of get into those spaces as well for a tabla player. The only thing is there has to be enough study of that musical form also. Otherwise, then it just becomes like, okay, you're adding one more instrument to the concert and that's it. It doesn't make musical sense. So there are tabla players. I gave Ustad Zakir Hussain's example. He's one of those tabla players who's managed to balance his classical upbringing along with a very modern and path-breaking take on music. So if you listen to his albums, Shakti, which is hugely popular, it has this whole collaboration of all kinds of instruments from around the world, and it sounds amazing. So yeah, tabla does have that potential to go along with and accentuate the music of other genres as well.
Hello, I wanted to ask, like earlier in this session, you mentioned how there used to be a societal imbalance, and tabla used to be seen as something which is behind the vocalist usually. But then later you said like how important it is for a tabla player to ensure that it is in scale with the vocalist. Also, they have to ensure that the tone of the rag or the artist that is being carried out appropriately by the tabla player. So when we say things like that the tabla player has to ensure that it goes in line with this, or that the intent is being carried, doesn't that automatically imply what was being thought earlier, that tabla is used to complement a vocalist or someone playing harmonium? So
Correct. But the thing is, complementing somebody's music requires as much of a musical brain as presenting a solo recital. So I could be complimenting him, but for that I need to know his music plus my music. So when he's doing his thing, he just needs to make sure that there's a decent tabla player with him, and he can do a pretty good performance. But as a tabla player who's accompanying, there is a lot of research that I have to do. So if I want to play with a harmonium solo, I need to go and listen to hours of harmonium recordings to understand their music. If I need to play with Kathak, I need to know Kathak compositions. I need to go and sit with her and learn from her what each composition is trying to say. So the effort involved is a lot. So just because you're taking a complementary role on stage does not mean you're any less of a musician. So which is why the societal imbalance doesn't make sense. I mean, we could be together on stage, complementing each other, but have the same level of musical thought process, So that's how it goes.
Also, has there been an evolution in the type and nature of material which is used to make the tabla, or have they been like stayed the same over the years?
It has definitely undergone a lot of evolution. Uh, the earlier tabla players, most of them, like I said, belonged to families that did just music. That was their main source of income, livelihood, whatever you call it, and their education was music. So they didn't go to schools or colleges and have degrees and then do music. That's how it was in the earlier times. So that also reflected in the types of compositions. And I don't mean to say this in a derogatory way, but the lack of education did play a role. Uh, even, uh, Even though they were uneducated, they came up with some amazing compositions. But then slowly, what happened is this whole process of teaching and learning music became a little more democratized, if you can put it that way. And then a lot of educated people started coming into music, and then they had their own ideas. And but the interesting thing is, one of the pioneers of tabla, Ustad Allah Rakha, who kind of made tabla much more mathematical and technical, was in fact not educated. So he brought in this. He brought in a lot of complex math into tabla. So earlier tabla was more about the language of tabla and the beauty of the language. So you had compositions like dhin dhagina dha dhagina dha gita gita dhinagina te ghana dhagita gita dha gita gita dhinagina tin takina ta takina ta gita gita dhinagina ta gita gita dhin dhagina dha gita gita dhinagina dhin dhagina dha. So these are compositions that explore the beauty of the language. Now we have a lot of compositions which are very mathematical. So the first thing that I played, the Peshkar, is something that is very, very mathematically complex, but which is put across in a musical way. So if I'm saying dha, krdha, dhinna, dha, tit, dha, dha, dhinna, dha, dha, dhinna, tit, dha, dha, dhinna, dha, tit, dha, dha, dhinna, dha, krdha, dhinna. Now this is very straightforward. Now I start playing with the microbeats. So dha, krdha, dhinna, dha, krdha, dhinna, dha, krdha, dhinna, tit, dha, dha, dhinna, dha, tit, dha, dha, dhinna, dha, krdha, dhinna, dha, krdha, dhinna, dha, krdha, dhinna, dha, krdha, dhinna, tit, dha, dha, dhinna, dha, tit, dha, dha, dhinna, dha, krdha, dhinna, dha. So this is very, very technical and requires a lot of presence of mind to be able to deliver this correctly. But this wasn't the case maybe, whatever, 100, 150 years back. It has evolved. The language has evolved. The way the phrases are linked has evolved. The way mathematics is infused in tabla has also evolved. So yes, it's a continuous process and it's still happening.
Okay, thank you.
You can also address questions to either Akul or Mitali, not just me.
My question was for Mitali only. What I noticed from the time you entered the stage was you carried yourself a bit different. So, since you've been learning, is this a part of your dance routine that when you enter the stage, you stay a certain way, you carry yourselves a certain way? When you sat, also there was a particular way you put your dress. So I wanted to know about that part.
Yeah, so since this is performing arts, right? So it has a visual element, it has an audio element, and if we've learned from our guru that if the approach is holistic, it's more appealing. So rather than being a choreographer, our guru was a director, and she used to explain how um, she was very fond of food. So she used to say कि अगर थाली है तो उसमें क्या क्या, like I want to see I don't want to see two brown curries. I want to see one green, one brown, maybe one white. Then I want chutney, I want farsan, I want this, I want that. And then the thali is more appealing, and that first look job is done. So then I have to taste it. So then second layer comes in. But the first layer, from the first layer itself, the presentation starts. And a lot of it is, I think, commanded by the discipline in which you learn. So since this is Shastriya, it has evolved and has taken a lot of time to evolve. There is a certain vocabulary, there is a certain discipline to in the manner in which the audience should sit, and also in the manner in which the performer should perform. And this has been mentioned in what you call the what is called the fifth Veda, the Natya Ved. So there are 4 Vedas, and then there is this 5th Ved, which is called Natya Shastra, the 5th Ved, in which it is mentioned how the performer should be and how the audience also should be. So I've been an I am an alumni, so I understand your body language and your the way you all are sitting, but yeah, can be debated. So there is a certain discipline which is required by the performer. You know how the spine should be, how the legs should be. You would have seen most of the Baithaks are with folded legs. So there is a certain reason why that has happened. And yeah, if you're interested, you can read about it. So I think this itself answers this question as to the moment you take the stage, how you're presenting yourself is, and then it comes naturally. Then you don't have to make an effort, but it comes naturally to you. Yeah, thank you.
My question was, being like you've been practicing Kathak since many years now, so which is the one moment that you find the most difficult, even today in Kathak?
I think what's already been discussed, that something spontaneous that some musician might throw at you on stage, and that comes as surprise. That's the most difficult part, but the most exciting part. So I think previously also, if you have had lectures of classical artists, classically trained artists, I'm sure they would have mentioned the excitement of coming close to the sum and landing on sum, and then seeing together. I mean, we joke about it that you will also see, and we'll also see, and he'll also see whether we land on sum or not. But that excitement is something that we live for, all of us. We live for that spontaneity and that excitement. But yeah, if I have rehearsed something very, very well, then it's more exciting than it's scary. But I think at any point it's as scary as it's exciting. That what if you don't land on some, or what if it does not work out, or it's that moment is only going to decide that. It won't be pre-decided. It'll happen when it'll happen. So that's the fun of performing arts. That you don't want to record a video without audience. That's not as much fun as performing for audience is. So I think that's most scary.
So my question is actually to Akul sir. When the 7-beat cycle was going on in Tabla, the Tal Rupak performance, you were playing a 7-beat lehra on the harmonium. So did harmonium become a complementing instrument to Tabla at that time, or how did that work? Can you please brief us all about it?
Actually, it was not a lehra. It was a composition set to Tal Rupak. It was in Rag Kirwani. So when he is playing, when the tabla player is playing, my job is to play the lehra. The composition now translates to the lehra. My job is only to keep that cycle, not to complement him when he is playing. But when I am playing, we are on mutual state where we complement each other.
Any other questions? No. Thank you.
It was a wonderful performance. These three art forms, tabla, harmonium, and Kathak, obviously work extremely well when performed individually, but when they come together like they did on the stage, they create something truly special and amazing. Thank you for showing us all what that feels like. Thank you so much. And thank you all for being an amazing audience.
Thank you once again to all of you. And thank you, Dinah ma'am, who got in touch and invited me. And thank you, Sept, for allowing us to present this art form over here. I hope you guys liked it.